Welcome to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about the episode from Season 5, The Ferris Wheel. If you're enjoying this, please do like and subscribe and share it with anyone else you think might enjoy. The Ferris Wheel episode was significant in a few different ways. Probably most importantly, this was the episode we were filming when Ellen Corby had her stroke. She didn't show up for work one day, and being the consummate professional that she was, Will Gear said, something's wrong. She would be here if she could. And he, along with a couple of the producers, went to Ellen's house and found her and took her to the hospital and likely saved her life. So it was a very surreal episode to film because we felt very unsettled about Ellen not being there. And if you watch the episode, you'll see that early on, when Elizabeth is sleepwalking, there's a point where she falls down the stairs and Grandma and Grandpa come out of their room and go, "What's going on?" But subsequently in the episode, when there's noise during the night, Grandpa appears, but he comments about Esther still sleeping because it was such a rough night, or various different things, but we don't actually see her again, which means sequence-wise, the way we filmed, she was there for a couple of early things, and then she was no longer in the episode, and they would have had to work around her, and you didn't see her anymore. It wasn't particularly common for us to be involved in stunt work on the Waltons because it wasn't really an action show. In the case of the Ferris Wheel, both Cammie Cotler and Eric Scott had to do some stunt work. Cammie, Elizabeth, of course, is sleepwalking, so she stands on the roof of the house. She stands in the tree house and threatens to jump off. And then, of course, everything on the Ferris wheel where she's doing that. Plus then the nightmare sequences where she appears to be falling, which was shot on the soundstage with her in a harness. And she said she was flying around 8 feet off the ground and doing all of that. They would have had a big wind machine blowing wind so that her hair and everything was flying around. So that was kind of an adventure. For Eric playing Ben, I spoke with him and he said that although they did have stunt people for him and for Cammie, that Eric said he really didn't use his stunt person. They did have a rope, a harness on him as he did all that climbing, but he said he did do that all himself. He said for the close-ups, when he is going across the beam of the Ferris wheel to drop down into the seat with Cammie, that they took pieces of the Ferris wheel or rebuilt it or did something on the sound stage so that they could do all those close-ups. So he was not particularly off the ground doing that. And he said, indeed, that John Walmsley at one point did sort of a little bit of a blooper fun thing where he kind of came up next to Eric and pretended to flap his arms as if he was up there flying, just to have some fun. Eric said, yeah, we were always trying to do things that would end up in our Christmas blooper reel. So John did that. And, kind of flew up and said, oh, you need a hand? And Eric said, no, I got this. Okay. And John kind of flew off. So just a cute moment. So that was sort of how the stunt work was done. So a mix of for real on the back lot of the studio where they put that, erected that Ferris wheel in front of the space where we had Godsy's store, and then some close-up and work like that with both Cammie and Eric on the soundstage. This episode was written by Rod Peterson and Claire Whitaker, who wrote a number of episodes of The Waltons and also served as producers on the show for a number of seasons. In this case, they talk about how this particular storyline came to Claire literally in her sleep, where she kind of woke up and said, I saw the whole thing and had this dream and wrote it. The episode was directed by Lawrence Dobkin, who was both an actor and a director, had quite an extensive acting career, including playing Colonel Bell in the movie Patton, which I saw and was very excited to see him in. I loved him as a director because he was also an actor. I always found that easier as an actor to relate to a director who had been an actor because we just speak a different language, and oftentimes they were better able to help bring other layers to the performance, whereas sometimes the directors who had come up as directors, perhaps through being an assistant director or through camera work, they came at the process a little differently and sometimes weren't quite as adept at working with the actors on performance elements. So a lot of those cases, we were pretty used to who our characters were and what was going on. So in a lot of cases, we didn't need a lot of direction for our characters. But when we would get an actor as a director, then sometimes you could just add extra elements with the help of that director. This episode has a subplot about Ben, who is feeling like everyone is getting taller except him. So he has this crush on Darlene Jarvis at the local car dealership where he is selling ads. In this case, Debbie Richter played the role of Darlene Jarvis. In later episodes, when Darlene reappeared, she was played by actress Melody Thomas Scott, who went on to star and is still on The Young and the Restless. I had an opportunity to also work with Melody very early in our careers on a show called The Tammy Grimes Show, and we both appeared on an episode of that together. So it was great to work with Melody again. So in this case, Ben decides to try and get elevator shoes so he'll be taller, and then ultimately decides that height isn't what makes a man a big man or a hero or anything else, and decides to return them. Smart move. I think it was interesting that they talked about Elizabeth sleepwalking. When I was younger, evidently I used to sleepwalk. I never left the house, but my mom would tell me stories about she might still be up and I'd come walking out and she'd talk to me and I'd talk to her, but she clearly knew that I was asleep. I might walk out. At one point, she said, I came out in the middle of the night and went into the kitchen and got a pumpkin pie that she had made for Thanksgiving and started to walk back into the bedroom with it. And she asked me what I was doing. And I said I was getting the pumpkin pie or something. She took it away from me and sent me back to bed. So there were a few things like that I experienced when I was very young and have no recollection of, but they were fun stories to hear from my mom. Cammie obviously would have spent some time on that Ferris wheel, shooting all of those sequences where it went round and round and round. And she obviously did very well with it, because I don't remember her saying anything about getting seasick or anything. I remember very early in my career, one of the first things I did was this commercial, this Hostess Twinkie commercial. And we shot it at Griffith Park, and they had this merry-go-round. And they wanted just a lot of children on the merry-go-round and whatnot. There was no dialogue in the commercial. So I was very excited to get, as a child, to go and ride on the merry-go-round all day. And then there was a point where the director wanted a couple of children to run by the camera, which would have been a much more prominent featured role in the commercial. And I was one of the children chosen. Well, I was disappointed because I didn't get to keep riding the merry-go-round, so I didn't particularly care at that moment about being more featured in the commercial. I just wanted to ride the merry-go-round. So that's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, the episode The Ferris Wheel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll join me for more episodes of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. I'll see you soon. In the meantime, thanks for watching.